Hi, and welcome back to Just Ask the Question. I'm your host, Brian Kerman. With me today, this is a joy. Well, we've had this conversation several times over the last year with our friend Tom Arnold and about comedy in relations to Donald Trump and the rest of the world. And also joining us is Glenn Kershner, a comedy fan and also the legal mind among us. So he can add to reality because God knows we need some of that in the world today. So I start out by wanting to know where you think we are with free speech and comedy now, a year into the Donald Trump administration. And I'll start with this observation. I used to say that I thought that Donald Trump really wished he had been, since I worked at Playboy, I always thought he wished he had been the owner and operator of Playboy magazine, the way
Mhm.
he would talk. But
Yeah,
also watching Donald Trump, I think he's a failed stand-up comic.
yeah,
And I go and I say that based solely, now I also think he's kind of losing his mind, but based on what he said yesterday when he said it would be his honor to take over Cuba, and thank God Cuba is not in a hurricane zone.
mhm.
I actually busted out laughing at that, and I wasn't too far away from the action. So here we are looking at the president of the United States a year after he's gotten in. He's very bellicose. He's very upset about people who say anything that he doesn't like, including comedians. And we can take a look at, he calls them late night losers.
Jesus.
So anybody on the late night shows, Jimmy Kimmel et al, he calls them late night losers.
Yeah,
So here we are, and I'll start with you, Tom. I mean, you look, we did this on stage. We talked with our friend Hal Sparks a couple of weeks into the Trump administration, and one of the things I took away from that is you said something to the effect that, well, he can affect comedy, but he can't kill it. You still
right.
say that?
Yeah, first of all, Glenn, full disclosure, I have been to the Playboy Mansion with Donald Trump. So I just want
This-
to
yeah.
put it, and I used to say, but I wasn't the creepy guy. But then I realized I went to the Playboy Mansion with Donald Trump. That's pretty fucking creepy. So, uh, but he said, I want you to meet my new girlfriend. I got a new vodka coming out or something. He just done my sports show. I said, okay, let's go. Kara McDougal, Playmate of the Year, Bunny, very cute woman, very into Donald Trump, very nice. And then he's like, oh, Melania's here, my daughter. Let's all take a picture together. And I remember thinking, this guy does not care. He does not care. No, which you got to care a little bit to be president. Anyway, I think comedy's better now. When you got something going on where people are, it's very obvious. People are trying to subvert democracy. Got a president like it. You know, I was afraid that he is so fucking ridiculous that it would be hard to have comedy around him because just watching him. Uh, but it's great, and you know, Jimmy Kimmel standing up to him. You know, I was worried that Jimmy would, you know, because he genuinely is a great guy, and you know that wears on you. But Saturday Night Live is much better. I've always liked Saturday Night Live, but there's a lot there. And out of the road, you know, I kind of do a thing because I go to I'm on this tour now, and you know I go to places I know are Trump places. But it used to be they were so vocal, but now they're like, we don't want to talk about what's going on. They all like the Epstein files. I'll tell you that. I think
Yeah.
that was of all the things that he could do, but he doesn't think he's a comedian because, well, he's not funny. That's the thing. And he can't laugh with other people.
Or at
So
himself.
that himself, no. So, you know, he's death to comedy. And so he doesn't get it. And there's a lot of great late night hosts. You know, I always look for the person on the right that's funny. You know, it's not Greg Gutfeld. He used to be kind of funny on the Red Pill or whatever that
Right.
show was because he can make fun of everybody. But now he's just awful. I just saw a guy named Tim Dillon who's actually funny. He's right wing, but you know, talking about they're all very mad about the war and all this stuff. And you know, there are ways to make both sides funny, but you got to be willing to talk about everybody. And the fact that you have to say good things about Trump all the time, that there's nothing comical about that. He's comedy gold. Somebody on the right wing should be like, you know, that's the guy. He's ridiculous. He's this, but you can see them censoring themselves, especially on Fox.
Well, yeah.
It's death to comedy. You want a comedian that gets up there, and it's hard to tell what comedians are. Are they liberal? Are they whatever? But you can tell if they're cruel. You can tell if they punch down. And but there's a lot of great comedy going out there in big arenas. Sometimes they don't talk politics, they talk about their family, but you also can sense when they do get into that area how they feel.
Well, that's Glenn. I want to ask you, because you and I are both. Look, I've done stand up, but not like to Tom's level. I mostly show up. A
Yeah,
middle act is the best I've ever been. But
yeah.
Glenn, you and I were talking, and just a light went on in my head that here we are talking about the president of the United States going after comedians. And as a former prosecutor, man, that's got to hit you where I mean, with all the serious shit that's going on in the world, the president of the United States has to deflect from having people say comic things about him.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that there's anybody who has a thinner skin than Donald Trump. I don't even think he has skin. I think he's built up several layers of orange spray paint. I don't know that he's got any skin. But you know what?
I'm quoting you on that.
I always look for the things that make Donald Trump weaker. And, this is where Jimmy Kimmel comes in, because for a full decade now, Donald Trump has been threatening to prosecute people. Who was the OG of Donald Trump's threats to lock her up, lock her up, lock her up? Hillary Clinton. Hillary has never been charged with so much as a traffic ticket by Donald Trump. And then he had this long list of people he was going to prosecute, one after another, dozens and dozens of people. And then, I kept saying, Brian, I'm almost looking forward to Donald Trump bringing his first vindictive prosecution, because I predicted that the federal judiciary will cram a vindictive prosecution down Donald Trump's throat and down DOJ's throat, the DOJ lawyers who are ethics challenged and actually go in and try to, carry out Donald Trump's revenge campaign. And what did we see happen? James Comey was the first one that he indicted after threatening to indict people for a decade. How quickly did that case get dismissed? And it's never been rebrought. Interestingly, they didn't even get to the vindictive prosecution argument, because even before that, we learned that they sent beauty pageant contestant Lindsay Halligan into the grand jury. She didn't have any more right or lawful authority to be in the grand jury than Bugs Bunny had, because she wasn't lawfully or constitutionally appointed. And here's the thing, Lindsay, ain't no swimsuit competition in the grand jury. Okay.
Right.
And that case got dismissed like that. They didn't even get to the vindictive prosecution claim. Letitia James, the same thing. Then they started trying to prosecute people for throwing sandwiches at police officers. They tried to indict them on 8-year federal felonies, and the grand jury, sitting as the conscience of the community. The grand jury is we the people, by the way.
Right.
Just as 12 people in those wooden boxes in courtrooms all across the country, that's we the people. That's the conscience of the community speaking. First, they told Jeanine Pirro and Pam Bondi, we will not indict these people for 8-year federal felonies. You've ever heard the phrase, don't make a federal case out of it? Well,
Right.
That's what Jeanine Pirro tried to do with the guy who tossed the sandwich, because he was so angry that the streets of his city were being militarized by Donald Trump. And that guy, Sean Dunn, who threw the sandwich, he was a paralegal at the Department of Justice doing the work of the American people, right? Couldn't indict him. And then, so Jeanine Pirro fumbled forward and charged him with a misdemeanor, a low-level crime, by just signing a complaint, which doesn't take a grand jury indictment. They walked into court. They tried Sean Dunn, not guilty in a minute. That has now happened over and over again. They've also tried to prosecute the innocent, Senator Kelly and 5 other members of Congress who committed no crime. Instead, all they did was crack open the Uniform Code of Military Justice and read the military law. This is what I was taught in officer basic training and again at the Army's JAG school, that we must disobey unlawful orders. She tried to prosecute the innocent, and the grand jury said, get the F out of here. All right. But when it all comes down to when you want to expose Donald Trump's weakness, you got to go to Jimmy Kimmel.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
as the aspiring dictator that Donald Trump is, his words, not mine, I'm going to be a dictator on day one, but only on day one, because as we all know, dictators, once they come into total power, always voluntarily relinquish it on day two. That's what they do, right? So Donald Trump desperately wanted Jimmy Kimmel off the airwaves permanently, and he couldn't even keep Jimmy Kimmel off the air one flippin' week. Donald Trump is not very good at this dictator thing, and he is a paper tiger. And every time a comedian or a news organization or a law firm stands up to him, or a university stands up to him, or a grand jury tells him to go the fuck away, or a trial jury says go away, not guilty, that makes him weaker and weaker and weaker and weaker. That dude, I mean, he is not even a paper tiger at this point. He is a weak ass aspiring dictator.
Let me say something about Jimmy Kimmel. I think, Brian, you and I were on the air of one of your 20 podcasts right before when that first happened. And I said, I hope Bob Iger stands up for Jimmy Kimmel, stands up to Trump, the guy that runs Disney, who I've known since he used to help. We used to have to get Roseanne out of bed to go do the show bigger. But he did. And that's a big deal. Trump is terrible at this. He's got all his people, the attorney general, the FBI guy, all these people. When you got all your people and you tell them what to do, it should be easy. Prosecute this person, prison. He's terrible at it.
Yeah. To your point, I mean, I'm not going to toot my own horn because Jim Acosta did it, but Jim and I stood up to Trump and beat him in court. You've got to stand up to him. But to the point that we're talking about, Trump, when I talk to people in the White House, they go, hey, Donald Trump has been successful in getting people to talk about the right things because woke is dead and woke comedians are dead and no more woke comedy and no more woke this and no more woke that. I look at that and go, I don't know that he's ever been to a comedy club.
Yeah. What is woke? What does that mean? I have no idea what it means.
Well, well, I always say if you've got to attack woke, you're not, but that's another thing.
Yeah.
But Donald Trump, I watched him in the East Room, and I think I've told this story before. He's very good at making fun of other people, right? His comedy, like he made fun of a couple of members. He brought in the Clemson football team, or one of the football teams that won the the title, and one of the college teams, and he's introducing Steve Mnuchin, and he goes, look at that guy. He couldn't be a football player. You're a big, beautiful specimen of men. And look at that guy. He looks like Mr. Peepers. And he's very good at making fun of and punching down. But I've never seen him make any kind of self-deprecating humor. I've never seen him actually be funny, though he thinks he is.
Yeah, a buddy of mine, Dan Gable, the greatest wrestling coach, college level ever, maybe the greatest college coach ever. He got the Medal of Freedom, I think it was.
Right.
I was like, Trump. Dude. But he went there, brought his family, his wife, his kids, his grandkids. They're in the Oval Office, and his grandkids are tearing the place up. And Trump was not happy. At one point, Trump knows nothing about Dan Gable. He also gave Jim Jordan the award, which there's no comparison. But he looked over at Dan and goes, geez, you're small. I wonder if I can beat you. And Dan said, you'd have no chance. And so I had to print up T-shirts. I have one here. You'd have no chance. We sell.
I want one of those.
Gable Museum. Okay, we'll get you one. I respect that. I respect that he didn't go, oh boy, I would lose to you.
Yeah.
You got to punch a bully in the face is what you've got to do. And now, Tom, you're singing my tune because my pop was a high school wrestling coach and football coach and a boxer, and that's what I grew up doing. I got to wrestle Dan Gable at Dan Gable's wrestling camp. I attended his wrestling camp.
Wow, that's cool.
In Jersey every summer, and he would roll around on the mat with the kids just so we could say we wrestled Dan Gable. But yeah, that wrestling was my sweet spot growing up. But I don't find anything funny about Donald Trump. I've never seen him. He's a funny human being because he's such an imbecile. He can't put words together.
Yes,
he has no common sense. He's always bragging about himself, and he's got which I think shows an inferiority complex, which is
Well,
what
Jesus, yeah.
he's wrestling with.
Yeah.
But the other thing that's interesting about him is I think we've only seen him apologize once in the public spotlight. Can you guys remember when that was?
I
It
can't
was
remember one time, and I've covered him for
this
8
is
years,
the
but
only time, and it looked like it was a hostage video. It was after the Access Hollywood tape when he said,
ah,
"Oh, I'm sorry, but that was locker room talk." I think that's the only time we've heard "I'm sorry" pass his lips, which again tells you something about a man or about a person if they can't admit to their own mistakes, their own failings, if they can't apologize. He thinks this is an indication of strength if you never say you're sorry. Kindness is not weakness. Kindness is strength. Taking responsibility for your own mistakes is strength, not weakness. That's why I like when General Mark Milley made a mistake and walked across, the square and, was standing there while Donald Trump was holding that Bible upside down, a book he's never
yeah.
read. And Mark Milley said, "You know what? I was wrong. I was wrong." And then, he came out and said, "We do not obey one man. We do not obey a tyrant or a dictator. We obey the Constitution." Boy, did he take responsibility for his mistake, and we've all made them. And then he more than made it right. Donald Trump does not have the capacity for any of that.
Well, but he's really, if he wasn't a monster, if he wasn't capable of destroying the whole world, there's a lot of funny shit about him. His cadence, the way he, today Peter Doocy, when he said the president called me and he agreed with me. I don't want to say his name, but Peter Doocy doing a good job. Was it Clinton? I don't want to say. Was it Obama? I don't want to say. Biden. He went through the list, and they all reached out. None of them have spoken to him. But the idea that he lies, and now people are kind of
Oh,
trying.
you mean when he was talking about talking to 4 previous presidents who backed him up on what he did, and he had, and so we went and interviewed the 4 presidents, and all of them said, "No, he's lying. We never talked to him." That
Right.
incident, Tom,
Yeah,
that's hilarious. I
Yeah.
mean, but I'll tell you something that, to your point, that Mary Trump told me, and I asked her one time. I said, if you could say anything to Donald that you wanted to, what would you say to him? And she said, I would look him in the eyes and tell him, I'm sorry, no one ever loved you. She goes, if he weren't president, to your point again, she said she would feel sorry for him because he's so bitter, angry, and acrimonious. And I said, well, what, we talked about his sense of humor one time, and I'll never forget what she said. She goes, what sense of humor? He has none.
Right. And you can't get to him by saying, I'm sorry, no one ever loved you, because he's a sociopath. He's narcissistic. So it's not like I'm looking for that moment with him. I'm sure his whole life people like, okay, I'm gonna break through. We're gonna have our moment, but he's just not capable. So it's on us to go, this is how he is. He's not gonna change. We got to keep our eyes on him. This is how if the people around him, hopefully they'll suck up a little less. But and Pete Hegseth, I'm trying to think
Little
who's the
Pete
worst.
Hegseth.
But he is, I don't know if someone goes before he goes on and said, here's what you got to act out. Or if Trump talks to him, you got to do this, you got to do manly, whatever. And, threaten people, threaten the media. But of all the people, and there's some bad people. That guy, I can't even imagine what's going on at the Pentagon with decent people. Glenn might know, with decent military men and women. I mean,
well, I know that my sources in the Pentagon are extremely upset, and they've said, "Look, we warned him not even to go in." They've tried going into Iran. That Pete Hegseth is not a guy that can lead this action. They've given off rants to Trump and Hegseth that they don't take. Hegseth will come out and tell us we're unserious. CNN and the New York Times, unserious reporting, but he won't tell us what's going on. So the American people have a right to know what's going on. And if you're not going to tell us, we're going to find out. He is the most unserious man I've ever seen preen or primp in front of a makeup mirror at the Department of Defense. And it's frightening to me.
Everybody's glad they killed the Iranian whatever.
Yeah, nobody's going to mull
all of those people.
Yeah.
But, it's bad when less than a year ago, they said we've totally obliterated the nuclear program. They'll never be able to And it's hard to go back and go, they
Okay.
were 3 days away. That's what he's saying.
All right. So 7 months ago, he drops bombs, says we completely obliterated
I
their
like that.
ability to build a nuclear weapon. 3 weeks ago, he starts a war saying we have now obliterated them. They were 2 weeks away from building a nuclear weapon. Today, he said they were a month away from building a nuclear weapon. But he says we have obliterated their Navy, their Army, their Air Force. We have laid them low. They cannot stop us in any action we've taken. So my question is, Mr. President, why the hell are we still at war? Glenn?
Yeah, and not to mention, he told us that all of the military capabilities of Iran completely destroyed, completely obliterated. And by the way, we're going to need about a dozen countries to send their battleships to safely escort people through the Strait of Hormuz. Well, are the Iranians going to be standing on the banks of the strait throwing rocks because they don't have a military capability anymore? Donald Trump said it's been obliterated, and the world is laughing at him, and even worse, the world is turning against him. And frankly, all of this is endangering our military troops.
Well,
a guy who fled, he lied about bone spurs to get out of military service, is sending people to their death. Our boys and our women and our soldiers, our brothers, our sisters, he's sending them to their death.
Then he's taking pictures, a big picture of him at the ceremony with the coffin between him and the photographer, and sending that out to raise money. And he said, they said, do you think that's inappropriate? He goes, no, it's fine. But he believes that, you know.
I was going to tell you that to me is bad comedy, but that's, I mean, if you're going to, but to that point today in the Oval on a couple of occasions, once again, he told us we have obliterated them. We could stop. We're ahead of schedule. We're a couple of weeks away. And at the same time, what bothers me, and I think CNN did this comparison on his speech yesterday, he said one thing, 30 seconds later, he contradicted what he said 30 seconds before. So he tells us we can do this all by ourselves. We don't need any help. And by the way, you know, it's almost like he said to our NATO allies, you can't fire me, I quit, or I'm going to pick up my ball and go home. But when he said, I don't need your help. And then 30 seconds later, he said, to your point, Glenn, he said, I need minesweepers. If they just sent, I just need a few minesweepers. That's all I need. And they wouldn't do it.
He's so fucking embarrassing. How embarrassing that he's the president of the United States and he acts like that. It's I don't know how we will dig out of that, but
well, I think we've ruined our reputation with the rest of the world. But Glenn, you were shaking your head.
Yeah, I mean, in the world, I think there are folks all around the world who are rooting for us. I mean, I think a lot of them understand that this does not represent the majority of the American people. Maybe the MAGA base makes up 25 or 30% of the population. Maybe, I don't know. And the other thing is, I mean, I think we all understand the people can fall prey to cults, and it's very hard to have sympathy for them. But when people get sucked into a cult, what do we ordinarily do? We try to help them. We try to extract them. We try to explain to them that this is not good for them. But we also know that at the end of the day, some cult members will drink that Kool-Aid. And that seems to be what some of this MAGA cult will do. You know, when I look at the people who attacked the Capitol on January 6th, and I spent, decades prosecuting just a couple of blocks away from the U.S. Capitol at the D.C. U.S. Attorney's Office, the president of the United States told them, your vote was stolen. Your election was rigged. Your favorite president is being taken from you. And if you don't go to the Capitol and fight like hell, you won't have a country anymore. You love your country, don't you? Guess what? I joined the Army as a young man because maybe I fell for it all. Patriotism, we're the good guys. But if my commander-in-chief told me, hey, Glenn, you got to go fight for your country, you're not going to have a country anymore, I would have saluted smartly, and I would have gone on whatever deployment I was required to go on. I don't want to say I have sympathy for the people who attack the Capitol, because you need to be able to discern fact from fiction. But when the president of the United States says this stuff and drills it into your head, I understand why some of them were motivated to go attack the Capitol.
I was
They
standing there. Yeah.
and what kills me to my core as a rule of law guy is these 1,600 people got convicted. Now they've been pardoned, but a lot of them spent time in prison. And the person who ordered the attack on the Capitol hasn't suffered one day of accountability,
and never
not
will.
one day.
Never will.
And I can't live with the belief that he never will. I think
I
it is our sworn mission, as long as we're drawing breath, to make sure accountability comes for that big orange, you know what.
I think it'll end up like Nixon. I think Nixon got away with it, and all of his underlings. And I predict orange futures for Pam Bondage and for Stephen Miller and for Pete Hegseth and a few others. But Donald Trump, I don't think they'll. I honestly think he'll die in office. But or he wants to. That's why he wants the big.
Hey, Brian, don't
Yeah.
you fucking wish Nixon was the president now? I mean, Nixon was horrible. He was a criminal, but compared to this fucking guy,
Absolutely. Yeah,
Jesus.
isn't that a horrible thing? Now, there's a line in a comedy movie,
Yeah.
but both of your all's point. Here's an article that The Guardian published today. The U.S. is no longer a democracy. One of the most credible global sources on the health of democratic nations now says this outright. The Varieties of Democracy, VDEM Institute at Gothenburg University, reached the alarming conclusion in its annual report that the U.S. is hurtling towards autocracy at a faster rate than Hungary and Turkey. And there aren't too many comics from Hungary or Turkey. So, I mean, taking it back to that, Donald Trump's influence on entertainment, right? He took over the Kennedy Center and no one wants to go there anymore. So he closed it down and said he's going to rebuild that. He tore down the East. Well, I don't even want to go there, but he comes out and says it's good as long as it's the right kind of entertainment. And the right kind of entertainment to him is entertainment that doesn't mention him. And one of the things that got me in the biggest trouble when I was talking to, and this is a week before the election, and I was in Detroit making a speech, and Donald Trump was there. We stayed in the same hotel. This was the weekend before the election, and I ran into some of the members of his inner circle that I know pretty well, and we started talking, and they were still pushing, Glenn, to your point, the lie about January 6th, and they still do. And I was there, man. I mean, I had my life threatened that day. And I know you all have probably seen the pictures of people crawling up the wall, right? I got into the most trouble that day because I said, hey, morons, there are steps on either side. You don't have to climb the freaking wall. Somebody's going to climb and fall and break their neck. Someone climbed the wall and fell, and I don't know what he broke.
That was hilarious. It was great when he fell and broke his fucking neck.
Yeah,
that's the only thing I liked about it. I'll give you an example. Back in 1990,
okay.
I was married to my first ex-wife. I have 4, Glenn. And I'm a single dad with 2 little kids, 4 ex-wives. So I can never retire. I have to work my ass off forever. But my wife at the time, Roseanne, people, compliment you all the time. We did have a great sitcom. She was a great stand-up comedian. She was a very good writer, but then they started telling her she could sing. And as her husband, my job is to encourage her, but also protect her, from herself. So she said, I want to sing the national anthem at Dodger Stadium.
God.
And I was like, that is a hard, hey, Barbara Streisand pre-records that song. It's a hard song. And I said, if we went back and forth, I'm gonna lose that battle, but I want to win the war. I said, how about you do it in San Diego? That way, if it goes bad, no one will ever hear about it. So we went down to San Diego, and she sung the national anthem, and it was not going well. I was supposed to throw out the first pitch afterwards. The guy comes up the ball and is like, hey, buddy, you probably won't get the fuck out of here. I go, give me the ball. I'll never be allowed in a baseball stadium my whole life. I'm throwing the pitch. You can see my fat ass get up there on the mound, throw the pitch. Now, it's all results. She sat on the plane. It's a 20-minute flight. And then I convinced her that she did well. Booing. Oh, that's a sign of endearment. You've never been to a baseball game, honey. Booing, boo, pow. And a lot of people were cheering. You know what? They thought you were brave, and they're cheering. They know you're a comedian, not a singer. I think it went great. And then she's like, it was fun. It was great. So I had her there. Problem was, the president of the United States, George Herbert Walker Bush, was friends with the owner of the Padres, watching the game live with some press people around him. And when she sang, he said, "That's a disgrace to America." So when we landed at LAX, there's 100 of those TMZ type guys. They had the big metal cameras back in the day. We're trying to walk through. They are on it. 3 guys are like bumping up on her too. And she's 5 foot tall. She says, "Get him, honey." So what do you do? So I chase them down to baggage, break their cameras, a couple of other things. And it's like, "Oh my God, you're my hero." And there was a 4th photographer down there taking pictures of all that, which I'm sure you could Google. So I was arrested. I knew I wasn't going to go to prison because I had the best witness in the world, my wife, who they assaulted. You may know, I don't know if you know this, Roseanne has 27 different personalities. She's written about it, and only 2 of them like me. That's a fact. So get her on the stand. Get her on the stand. Marty Singer's like, "Tell the jury what happened, Roseanne." And she's like, "I wasn't there." So I ended up in an orange jumpsuit, signed at the 405 from 6 o'clock Friday night to 6 a.m. Monday, picking up fucking McDonald's wrappers with the Hillside Strangler. It was pretty peaceful. Then I went on Johnny Carson. And I was trashing the president. And it wasn't funny. They weren't They weren't funny enough. They were just being cruel. And so the next day I see Maria Shriver, and she's like, "Hey, saw you at Carson talk about the president." That was pretty rough. I go, because Arnold's his fitness guy. Right. I go, "Yeah, but he doesn't watch Johnny Carson." She goes, "I bet he does." I go, "Well, he doesn't care what I say." She goes, "I bet he does." And I'm like, "Shit, you give me something to write on." So I write it out. "Miss President, I know you're a public figure. I was being mean. They weren't funny. And I apologize for that." I give it to Maria. And 48 hours later, a Secret Serviceman came to my house with a handwritten letter from the President of the United States that said, "Dear Tom, Jerry Weintraub says you're a nice guy." Who's probably the only other Jew he knew in Hollywood. But he says, "Of course you can make fun of me. That's part of it. Will you fly in and have dinner with Barbara and I next Saturday night?" I'm like,
never get that
you
out of
gotta
this
be
president.
shitting me. That's why I couldn't, when people were dogging George W. Bush about the war, I'm like, stop. The Bushes, high quality family. Cheney and Rumsfeld are monsters. But, so you would never get that. And that is, I got that somewhere hanging. I mean, it blows me away how, that's the way it's supposed to be done. The decency, it's a long time ago.
So going forward, Glenn, is there anything, do you see any hope on the horizon?
Yeah, I do. I think the midterms, I think they're going to be spectacular. And yes, Donald Trump is going to try to send, masked marauders to the polls, going to try to intimidate voters, try to suppress the vote. He will fail. Look at the way the elections have been going over the past couple of years. And his numbers in the polls are lower than whale shit right now, Trump's number. And they're going to continue to sink, I believe, because, this war started. He started underwater in the polls, and it's only going to get worse. I just hope at some point he declares an unqualified victory and brings our folks home. I fear that the void and the vacuum he will leave in the Middle East will be filled with more horrific people like the Ayatollahs and the people who have been oppressing the people of Iran since 1979. The damage is done, but how about no more of our troops get sacrificed?
Glenn, I have hope too, and it's women that are going to save us. When the shit went down in Minneapolis, the response from I lived in Minneapolis 5 years. It's freaking cold there, and the people that showed up and said this is not okay, and it scared Trump enough to kind of get out of there. But that's what's going to happen with the midterms.
Well,
people
I have fear and hope. And my fear is, to Glenn's point, I think he has been an excellent recruiting tool for future terrorists. And I think that this will not look. He wants to go back 47 years. How about you go back to 1953? The root cause of all this was Britain, the United States, and a couple of oil companies acting like J.R. Ewing, who installed the Shah because they wanted to nationalize the oil industry. And we said, oh, no, you can't have that. That created the extreme religious sect that became the revolution. So we're culpable for a lot of what's going
Yeah,
on
for
in
sure.
Iran. I have this feeling that Americans do still have more in common with each other than we have different from each other. And the real fight is not between it's between the haves and the have-nots. And it's a big party, and we're not invited to it, to quote the comedian George Carlin. So
But also, I have to admit, I'm in a softcore porn Playboy video with Trump. So I've done porn with him. So
how
I
many
can
times did you
see, I've
go to
known
the
him 40
mansion?
years.
How many times did you go to the mansion?
Oh, quite a few. You know, they had a lot of great events up there. Sunday night, they screened movies. You
Yeah,
know, I
I
wasn't a
went twice.
I wasn't the guy that hung out in the grotto. But Hugh Hefner is very
All right.
loyal. I wrote for the magazine. And if I had,
Me
you know,
too.
my book came out, he brought all the gals and came to it. He's very, very loyal guy. So,
Glenn,
you
did
know,
you go to the mansion? Ever get a chance?
I have never been, nor am I in the Epstein files. Proudly, I just wanted to get that out.
oh my God. Hey, listen, my buddy, Steve Tisch,
There's a lot of
one
comedians
of
in
the
the Epstein
giants.
files.
Yeah. I'm godfather to his kids. He was my third wedding best man. Greg, oh God, the emails he wrote to Epstein. I knew they were kind of buddies. I thought it was funny. Like he's like, you know, Epstein that I thought, but then to read those emails, man, and I was like, the NFL's gonna kick him out. It's gonna be so sad. His dad bought that team just so he could shake the players' hands after the games. And now he's gonna but they did a brilliant thing. But I feel sorry for John Tisch and Lori Tisch, brother and sister, because they had to do the same thing. They passed on their ownership to their children. So, you know, he still gets to go to the games and everything. You know, we all know a few people that were, I mean, people are so fucking stupid. They look up, they was a
Well,
rich guy.
but Epstein and Trump both love comedians is the thing. I mean, I know a lot of comedians, East Coast comedians, that were invited to Epstein, not the island, but to his home. I don't want to say them, you know, without them saying them, but
Why?
Tom,
Why? Who?
like, well, you and I know a lot of them, Tom.
Well,
And
that's a gig. That's a gig. You go
there you
anywhere.
go.
I've done gigs in Afghanistan, Iraq. You know, that's a.
So
Yeah.
they love comedians, but
Yeah.
they don't really get it. I don't think the
No.
comedy. I don't think they understand comedy, and that to me is what's fascinating and frightening. So I do want to ask you both, other than Tom, who's still on the circuit these days, and Mark Zaid and I, just a heads up, Glenn. Mark Zaid and I caught Tom. Where was it? In Baltimore.
Maybe.
It
Yeah.
was a great gig. But
Thank
other
you for-
than that, who do you like these days out on the comedy circuit who's maybe poking fun at Donald or politics or any of it? Glenn,
You know,
I'll give you the
I saw Godfrey when he came through DC about a month or so ago. Man, he put on a great show. I'm going to see Amir K next week, an Iranian comic. My wife is Iranian who lived through the revolution and had her rights revoked. I don't want to get dark again all of a sudden, but what I will but see, I'm like an old school guy. I will watch. I go down the rabbit hole of watching the old Carson episodes. You know, Don Rickles is probably one of my favorite all-time comics, and Rodney Dangerfield. I have all of the George Carlin albums back in the day that I can probably still recite by memory, and you know, so that was kind of my heyday and my sweet spot for.
Well, you know, there's a lot of great women comedians. Roseanne was really great. When I met her way back, I performed with her. I'm like, this woman she's different. She's great. Nikki Haskell is so fucking funny. I do like to watch the old Carson and the old roasts, the Dean Martin roasts, because I personally hate doing roasts, getting roasted, because there are people you've never met fucking saying stuff about you, and you're like, I'm going to take you outside and beat the fuck out of you. I also don't like being mean about other people. And I remember that at the Joan Rivers roast, they wanted me to use the word cunt to describe her. I go, I'm not doing it. Then she came in my dressing room and goes, do it. That's a funny joke. Do it. I'm like, okay, but it feels weird. But the old Dean Martin ones, everybody, Hagen did one. John went, all these people, and you could tell they were friends. Like you could tell they were drinking, and they'd go out afterwards or whatever, you know. But it was fun, and there's some sharp jokes, but it was great. Everybody laughed about it, And
Yeah.
if you're go to a roast, if you're getting roasted, Donald Trump he got roasted Comedy Central. You know, you can tell he didn't like it. There's people that do that for the money and then sit there and they don't like it. Instead of getting even with them at the end with funny material, they sit there like, it's
Angry.
but I love when people make fun of each other and come
I
back.
enjoy the hell out of it. Busting bulls is what we used to call it.
Yeah,
Just
yeah,
I'm busting your bulls. Relax. Bada bit,
yeah.
bada bit. Burr, I'd like to see him
He's good.
again live.
He's very funny.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I like his.
But if you have a comedy club in your town, go to it, support it. You'll be surprised. And people forget. I forget. They'll tell me, I go the improv or the whatever is when I'm doing a show, and they'll sit and watch the other comedians and go, "Oh shit, this is fun. I got to remember that." And the crowds are huge. More people are going to comedy shows now than 10 years ago when Trump started. So that's
you
a
make a
really
great
good
point.
thing. And it's not just because it's political. You know, Bill Maher, who I've known for 100 years, is that I don't know if it's his age, but he's got a thing where, the left is, it's all everybody does. He's got to suck up so he can get on Fox, saying shitty stuff about, he's just has to force it in. And he went and had dinner with Trump, and if he shut up about it, people forget.
Yeah.
But he's like, it was good. He's a nice, whatever. People are mad at me. They want to cancel me because of that. But he went to that victim thing that the right wing does.
Yes.
I can't be honest. I can't. But there are, I like Bill. I watched the show, but people like John Oliver. John Oliver kills it.
Brilliant.
If you watch his show. And again, the late night comics, Jimmy is good. And, there's two Jimmys. They're good. I'm going to miss Colbert because he was brilliant in a different way. And it's their loss, these big companies. And so we'll see what happens. But entertainment always wins. If it's a great movie, if it's a great comedian, people are going to see them. You can say they suck if you're the president. They're terrible. They haven't been funny. They're a loser. People know. And the right wing goes to a lot of movies made by liberals because they tend to be the best fucking movies. And I think that'll always be the same. That'll always be the way it is.
The last question then, can we still laugh at ourselves? Tom, I'll give you the first.
Yeah, I'm in a fucking wheelchair for my back surgery. I got this fucking thing. Let me tell you something. I've never given this up. This is so fucking handy.
That's a portable urinal. I know.
Yeah. And I got 8 of them. So if I go into a room, there's one there. You got to laugh at yourself. I mean, that's why my tour is called my Crazy Ex-Wife Tour. And people are like, I know which crazy ex-wife that is. I'm saying, I say, she's not even close to me, my crazy ex-wife, because we didn't have kids together. Brian knows about the 8 years of court. The worst thing Roseanne did was go on Saturday Night Live and say, Tom Arnold has a 3-inch penis, which is confidential information. Take that shit to the grave. Also,
no,
the 747
the joke you made about that is what.
the 747.
Yeah,
the 747 looks small when it flies over the Grand Canyon. So, but you got to laugh at yourself. People love self-deprecating human being comics. And Trump is certainly not that.
No. I tell you, self-deprecating humor in trial work is huge because if the jury can see that you're not fully yourself and you can admit to a mistake and you can laugh it off and make yourself the butt of the joke. I'll tell a real quick one. We had a murder case where 2 groups of young men are shooting up a backyard area between a couple of apartment buildings. They can't shoot straight. They send a stray bullet through the back of a grandmother named Helen Fosterell, and they kill her. And it was a really complicated topography of the crime scene. So I had the FBI build a scale model of that area because I had witnesses say, oh yeah, somebody was in this window and somebody was down in the alley and and it brought it to life for the jury. So the big moment was I was going to take the sheet off this big scale model that had been built for like tens of thousands of dollars by the FBI. So here I go. I'm rolling it across the well of the court and it's on these wheels, but It's on a table that has collapsible legs, and I pull it off and I go to roll it, and one of the legs give out and it goes boom. And all of the scale model homes like start tumbling off of the model, and the jury's looking at me, and I'm trying to hold up this like 200-pound table. And I turn to the witness and I go, ma'am, please tell the jury about the day the earthquake hit your neighborhood.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant.
And it broke the tension. And it's like, I turned to the jury. I'm like, hey, folks, my bad. Give us a few minutes to fix this.
That's,
you know, it's like,
great.
But that's what you got to do. And if you can't laugh at yourself and bring everybody in on the joke, then you're Donald Trump.
But you were so quick with the earthquake thing. That's brilliant. You were quick. Your mind's good enough. You're funny enough. That's what you went with. Because some people, but most people in the world
Trump
would be
can't do that.
stunned.
Trump,
you know, they'd be like, "Yeah, that's brilliant."
The one I had with Trump was in the East Room when I asked later if we were going to have if we were dating, because he looked at me. I started asking him a question, and he's pointing at me, and he's winking. And he goes, I'm not going to talk to you. Sit down. I go, I'm already sitting down. Yeah, you are. He said, but I'm not going to talk to you. You're obnoxious. And I looked at him. I said, and I'm ugly too. And I got him to laugh.
Yeah, I miss you and
answer the question.
I miss Brian and Kellyanne Conway going at it. That was a fucking funny. That's when I first reached out to Brian. Like, that's a show, man. Because you play the dumb guy. Like, what? I was just I'm
just asking a question.
Yeah.
Well, so as we close out, anybody want to plug anything, Glenn? I'll give you the first shot there.
No, I mean, these days I'm on Substack, and we do a community meeting live every night at 8:30, and we have a great group of, democracy warriors. We talk about the legal issue of the day, and we talk about how we can engage in this fight for the rule of law and for everybody's rights. So come on over to Substack. It's free. I don't put anything behind a paywall, so you can just jump on live at 8:30 with us.
That's
there
cool.
You go, Tom. What you
that's
got
a better
brother?
show than this one. I go to tomarnoldcomedy.com, and you'll see the dates I have. I'm in Palm Springs this week. Next week, I think I go to Rochester, New York. I mean, I'm everywhere. So check it out at a theater or a comedy club near you.
There you go. And this is Just Ask the Question. I'm your host, Brian Kershner. I want to thank everybody for joining us. It's been a great time, and we'll catch you next time.